Hello, my name is Bob Barker. I'm one of the managing partners at Barker Gilmore. And thanks for joining today's General Counsel Advantage webinar. At Barker Gilmore, we're very passionate about building, developing, as well as optimizing corporate legal and compliance organizations. And we do that by recruiting general counsel, as well as any lawyer that reports into the general counsel, chief compliance officers as well. We develop the organizations through executive coaching, as well as things like succession planning. And we help in the optimizing area by helping in organizational design, process improvement, as well as best practices. Today's topic is critical for those that are of you who are running legal departments, legal organizations, and really want to have a big impact on the success of the organization. Today's topic is charting a strategic course for your legal department. And this, while the topic says legal department, this also pertains to compliance departments, as I know there's a number of chief compliance officers that are attending as well today. We also have these webinars on a monthly basis. Next month, the topic is how to make yourself indispensable to your company. And we also have a library of previously recorded on-demand webinars that you can find on our website. Today's webinar is being recorded and it will be added to the library in about 3 weeks. An email will also be sent out to everyone who's registered once that material is available. You'll also find this in our monthly newsletter as well. During the webinar today, please submit your questions by clicking on the Q&A icon in the Zoom application. You'll also be able to view questions that others have submitted. And if you like that question, or if your question is similar, just click the thumbs up button that you'll see, and that way it'll migrate to the top. And so AB and Jason will know that this is a popular question. And we'll do our best to answer as many of the questions as we can throughout the session today. At this point, I'd like to turn things over to AB Cruz, and then I'll be back for a wrap up at the end.
Thank you, Bob.
So much.
Very much appreciated. Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are. We're glad to have you. As Bob mentioned, our topic today is entitled Charting a Strategic Course for Your Legal Department. Quick background, my background. I've had the good fortune and privilege of serving as the chief legal officer for 4 different companies and a couple stints as chief compliance officer, dual-hatted. I have also had a long career in the military, retiring as a rear admiral in the Navy. And so if you're wondering where the term charting came from in the title of this particular topic, you'll know why. And I may allude to share some sea stories along the way. I've been known to do that. So we'll try to keep the discussion live. Let me tee the topic up. And I think there's probably some GCs, maybe some chief compliance officers that can relate. So I first became a GC after having been the deputy general counsel in the VUCA organization. I became a GC in 2004. And I knew I was joining a company where I was going to be the first ever GC in that company's history. And it was 128 years old at the time. And so I really wanted to prepare. I talked to a bunch of mentors, other chief compliance officers, other chief legal officers to kind of figure out how I was going to step into that new role and really make a positive difference. And so like many folks, I came up with a 100-day plan, and I knew that I was going to be building a legal structure, a legal function for the company. And so I really, had a detailed plan. Well, like most fighters know, and when they step into the ring, they have a strategy, they have a plan. and you get punched in the face. As you enter the door, you hit reality. For me, the reality was, well, the newspaper business, which is a good segment of our business, was being turned on its head in 2004. Nobody was buying, advertising anymore, and so the business model was falling through the floor. Not to mention all the litigation that I learned about, and not to mention the employment and issues that we had at the company. Needless to say, it was like whack-a-mole. It was crisis after crisis, and so I oftentimes had to put my little plan, my little 100-day plan aside. Then there was another thing, finding out about what your budget is, and sometimes that was a moving target, and managing to the budget. And I found that our short-term priorities were dictated by, this whack-a-mole mentality, or this need to cut budgets and so forth. Then fast forward, I had the great, and I'm so glad that I took a lead role in the company's strategic planning process. This is for the whole company. I had done strategic planning in the military. A lot of the principles applied, but I managed or helped manage that process from start to finish. And I realized that, if you do it right, a strategic plan really does lay out for the entire, in this case, for the entire company, kind of a roadmap, a Bible, if you will, on how it's going to march forward. And if a good strategic plan has all the operational details listed under them, and with timelines, with people assigned and so forth. So I took that back to the legal department. I spent a lot of time with business development and finance, and obviously the strategic plan for the company was more geared towards the business. And so there was not a lot of, mention of legal in there or compliance. But I did think that, we should have one for the legal department, just like the finance department had one for themselves. The business development folks had it for themselves. And so I just made it a point in all my successive jobs that we would dedicate the time necessary to come up with a strategic plan, so that no matter how busy we were, we always could return and know, and everybody was on the same page in terms of what we wanted to accomplish, both near term and long term. And so that's why I thought that it would be a good idea to have this particular conversation. I do think it's important that legal departments of all sizes be guided by a definitive strategy with specific underlying goals and objectives. And so that's what we're here to talk about today. We are joined by someone who knows this, who knows a little bit about strategic planning process. In fact, he knows a lot about it. Jason Windmill is here with us. I will tell you that I came across Jason's name and his company Argo Point by reading an article. And when I read the article about strategic planning for legal departments, I said, this guy wrote down what I've been doing for years and years, and what I truly believe in, what's the right way to make a long-term difference for the legal function in a company. And so we are joined today, and I'm so glad to have him. I'm so glad we've gotten to know each other over the last few weeks. Jason is a managing partner at Argo Point, and has for over 2 decades. He has done management and strategy consultant. He, like me, has crossed a range of industries, and he's worked energy like I have, insurance like I have, health and pharmaceuticals like I have, retail, financial services like I have, and media. So we've got a lot of overlap. And I like the fact that he's also spent a lot of time in nonprofits, which I always love doing. He has held positions previously with Bain & Company, obviously a leading international strategy consulting firm, Rosabeth Moss Cantors, former editor of the Harvard Business Review and chair of HBS's management faculty consulting practice. Jason is an honor graduate of Harvard. He received his MBA also from Harvard, didn't want to stray too far, I guess, and where he was elected to lead the Dean's Forum on Business Ethics. He resides and works out of Boston, and he has served on strategic planning committees at the Museum of Fine Arts, the Boston Public Library Foundation, and the Charles River Esplanade Association. With that, Jason, welcome. Thank you for taking the time to join us. How about an introductory, whatever you want to say, or you want to add to your bio?
Well, AB, it's really a pleasure to be here as your guest and Bob's guest, and we've already had some great conversations about strategic planning, and I'm looking forward to continuing that. And I guess thank you. The introduction was far too kind. I'm excited to be here because in some ways this blends the two arms of my career. I'm not an attorney, and certainly don't aspire to be one. First part of my career was actually doing strategic planning for large Fortune 500 companies. I was working for a consulting firm called Bain, and then my career took a swerve into legal departments. In the past almost 20 years, I've been working with legal departments of all sizes, but employing those tools that work so well for the business, including strategic planning, but applying them to this area that has been in some ways busy and maybe skeptical and maybe even a little resistant to management tools that have worked well in other parts of the company. So the topic is one that I've spent a lot of time on, and I'm very flattered that there's actually a webinar to talk about it, because I don't get to talk about it enough.
Wonderful. Well, we're going to kick things right off. And again, as Bob Barker mentioned up front, if you have questions, pop them into the Q&A, and we'll try to pick up on, and we'll maybe intersperse a couple of the audience questions. I have a couple just tee up questions, and maybe that'll get the juices flowing and the thoughts flowing as well. And why don't we go ahead and kick off? So, Jason, what does strategic planning look like in the context of the in-house legal department?
Well, sometimes it doesn't look like anything because many legal departments don't do it, but that is changing. That's changing. And the more I'm out there and the more clients I go to, the more I'm likely to see we show up, hey, do you have a strategic plan? They're becoming more likely to have it. But when they do have it, the story is somewhat similar to what you said, AB, about I think it was the 128-year-old company that you were at, where the plan and the process is very similar to what you would find in the business, okay? And strategic planning, let's take a step back from a legal department. Strategic planning is one of the oldest management tools in existence, and it's enduring because it's a good tool. It helps to have a plan. As long as you're not so, underwater, you don't have time to develop a plan. It's a very, very valuable tool. So it's a tool. It's also a process. And there's also to my mind, a classic conceptual framework. Others may have a different framework, but the school that I've come out of would teach strategic planning as saying, you start off first with your current state. Where are you? You think about the future state. Where do you want to be? What does the future hold? And then the strategic plan assesses the gap and builds the plan from the current state to the future state. There are other frameworks, but that's the one that I was raised in. Now this kind of plan is going to have to take into account a lot of factors, and these might not be the factors that you have the time to think about in your day-to-day, getting emails out, responding to calls, making sure the things you wanted to achieve as an individual were achieved at the end of that day. I have my list and I struggle to complete it every day, but it's a chance to step back and say, where are our clients going? Where is the business going more broadly? Again, I think of your story about that company where the entire business model was under assault. That's not just going to impact the business, it's going to impact the legal department. And I would suspect in an industry undergoing digital transformation, the things you're doing in the 3 and 6 months may be different from what you need to do 3 to 5 years out. And of course it's a legal department. You also have to consider changes to the legal environment. They have nothing to do with business, but could be a new administration or new regulations. And then, I have not seen this historically, but we also live in a time, I believe right now, there is a societal change underway. We're thinking about so many societal issues differently. And I think it's time for legal departments to challenge themselves, as one chapter or one theme in their strategic plan, to think a little bit about how society and the globe is changing and how that's going to impact their strategy as well. So that's what's, hopefully I've served up a lot of things, the process, the concepts, some of the elements, but that to me is what strategic planning looks like. And, kind of curious if any of that resonates from your real life experience.
Yeah, very much so. And I'm actually glad you mentioned that tail end comment about, kind of social ESG items, right? So social, beyond just governance, environmental, social, ESG. Another area is diversity, equity, inclusion. I will tell you that the first, company strategic plan that I participated in the process, it didn't really have anything about DEI. Yet the legal, like the legal world was sensitive. I think more sensitive to maybe other industries on DEI. In fact, we didn't call it that at the time, but know that our strategic plan, our legal department strategic plan, had that as a pillar. And lo and behold, we kind of led the organization in that regard. I think ESG is another area where ESG has fallen, whether we like it or not, in many of the laps of our chief legal officers out there. Maybe it's outgrowth because governance is part of that ESG. But anyway, I think you've teed it up nicely. For people always want to talk, see, or at least contemplate the benefit. They want to kind of know what the benefit of going through the exercise, going through the process, painstaking process, because they're busy people and so forth. But when they hear about the benefits, I think then maybe it will garner more curiosity and more interest. So what are the benefits of a well-conceived strategic planning process and plan? You kind of alluded to it, but if we can talk in more concrete terms, your experience, what are those benefits?
Right. And you make a great point. Legal departments, my experience, have too much work and not enough resources. So there's got to be a value proposition to say we're going to push some other things out, or we're going to ignore some things today to make things better. So, to my mind, a good strategic plan provides conceptual guidance. Where's the department going as an organization? Now, everyone in the department, if it's I shouldn't say everyone, but most big companies would tend to have development plans for individuals. The sum of everyone's individual development plan is not the plan for the organization. So it's very valuable to have that. It can be a touchstone. It can help onboard new people. It can help be a framework to sort new ideas. Wait a minute, we have a new request coming in from the business, or there's a new technology or legal initiative I want to implement. It gives you kind of a framework. You can say, okay, those needs and requests are legitimate, but they need to sort of fit into this plan somehow. Where are we going to hang them on this? Where are we going to hang them on this Christmas tree? Because there's only so much space. The other thing that I think good plans must do, and some do not, but it's a marker of a good plan, it cannot simply be pie in the sky and abstract. It's got to tie back down into what I call markers and guideposts. It's got to tie to implementation. You say this better than me, so I'm gonna flip it back to you with the question when I'm done. But it's got to help. It can help leaders, and the leader is not just the general counsel. The leader can be the direct reports of the general counsel. There can be levels and levels below that. There can be many levels of leaders in a legal department. It can help you know if you're on track for something. I'm very often asked to come in and do a legal department assessment, and part of that is doing interviews. You ask attorneys and legal leaders, hey, what did you do last year? And you get this unbelievable list of things, because attorneys tend to be smart and motivated and responsible. And my God, sometimes you can't believe how much they've done. What I think is more informative and valuable is to say, well, what did you do compared to what was your plan? And I'll just give you one example that's kind of legal, can be hard to quantify, but I think this is a good one. Very often legal departments, when I show up, are very proud. They said, did you know that we did 50 trainings last year of clients? And we're so proud we got out in the field and we did it. And I say, that's great. That's tremendous. I'm happy for you. I applaud you for that. But did you notice there are 50,000 people that work for this company? How many trainings did you determine were optimal in the first place? Where was that documented? What was the rationale? And was it 50 or should it have been 500? And I don't know. But how did you do? Was that 50 100% of your plan, or 25% of your plan? So it provides some measures and metrics for leaders and also for the people operating in the department. And then the last point I make is the process itself. I am absolutely convinced is valuable. You talked about the fighter in the ring. I think there's also a quote that I remember from General Eisenhower saying, military plans are useless, planning is invaluable. And I think the process, the thinking that goes into the plan that lets you think differently, weigh different alternatives, step outside the day-to-day for a little bit is so valuable. And I'll use another analogy here. I think our friends in NASA, they're often in a position every so often of analyzing when things go wrong, and things can go spectacularly wrong when we're pushing the envelope of space exploration. And one of their phrases was after some terrible event was, it wasn't a failure of conventional engineering, it was a failure of imagination. And I think of that every time I do a strategic plan. What aren't we imagining? What, in the day-to-day, what aren't we considering? And it's a luxury in some ways. It's a privilege to take that time aside from the emails and the client demands. But I'm convinced that it's worthwhile and it's valuable. But let me flip it back to you, because the middle of my part talked about a strategic plan without implementation is not effective in my view. And I think you said it better. What's your view on that? And how have you seen it play out?
Yeah, I think our views on this are quite aligned. Harkening back to, I guess, a military thing. Well, first of all, I've had the good opportunity to, over my long careers, to work with a lot of great leaders. And one characteristic of a great leader is the fact that a great leader always can communicate clarity of vision, right? And that's first and foremost a general counsel, a chief legal officer, chief compliance officer. They too, for their constituents, their folks, they need to provide that clarity of vision. And in the military, it's the same way. If you've got strategic mission sets, which I often had to deal with at high levels, underlying those big, large strategic plans are operational plans that have the detail that you're talking about. They have kind of the timelines, the metrics, the responsibilities assigned to forces within that larger command or individuals within a smaller command. And if you're going out on a 8-month deployment, you have your mission sets all the way from the strategic down to the operational. You chart your course, and in the meantime, as you're transiting across towards the front line, to the tip of the spear, as they say, we run to the sound of the guns in the military, and you go there. Guess what? You're exercising those plans and contingencies so that you're ready to go. But at the same time, there's real world stuff happening. There's a lot of distractions. So a strategic plan is really important, because it has, like I called it a chart, I called it a Bible, if you will, a playbook, so that people, notwithstanding all the distractions and the things that are time consuming sometimes, you can always, hone your team down, and your teammates know, what's in that Bible, and they know that things outside of that, it helps with efficiency and effectiveness is what I have found, and that's the true benefit. And you can build into those strategic plans the fact that you're going to take a look at how your people are spending their time, and is that the right allotment of time in the grand scheme of things. And so again, a strategic plan that has those types of details, and I guess we'll talk more about that, is typically one that doesn't sit on a shelf. It's a real document, a go-to document that is dynamic, because you sometimes have to modify things along the way, but there is true benefit because it does keep the team focused. It does communicate that clarity of vision that good leaders always seem to have a knack for, painting that picture for the people that they lead. So I've always found that to be a benefit. You and I have talked about, why do leaders, why does chief legal officers, chief compliance officers hesitate? And maybe it's based on misconceptions. And so let's talk about that. What are some of the misconceptions that limit the effectiveness of legal department strategic plans?
So it's a great question. I think one of the things is it can overestimate the amount of effort that these take. I've seen great 20-page and 30-page plans, and I've helped write them. I've seen actually pretty good 2-page plans too, and then everything in between. So, and by the way, if I have a choice between a 2-page plan and no plan, I want to give me the 2-page plan. I'm very happy to have it. So, I think first of all, the investment can be scaled is probably the first misconception, and the first go at it can be a lightweight plan. And guess what? Once you have the first plan, when you refresh it, it's easy to add things on as things go. But you have to start it. I think another misconception is we've already done it, is what I hear a lot. And then I have the privilege of requesting documents from legal departments all the time. And because they fired me, they said, would you mind if I take a look at it? And what I see is it's really a response to the corporate finance function for the budget for next year. And people tend, oh, that's our strategic plan. And I say, no, that's a budgeting exercise for a 12-month or even a 24-month, or some companies can stretch that out, but that's a budgeting exercise. A strategic plan is above that. It talks about the factors, it talks about the goals, the promised land where you want to go, and then the budget and the finance can flow out of that and enable it. But the corporate finance requirements are not a strategic plan as I would define it. There's way too much missing. And then the last thing that I hear a lot is, well, legal is too uncertain for us to do planning. And to that I say, I get it. Like, stuff comes in, there are bet the company matters that the legal department is responsible for, and they are accountable for and do a very good job. That being said, I have yet to work for a legal department that doesn't have a reasonable amount of work which actually isn't bet the company matters and is relatively predictable. Most of my clients have employees. There's legal work related to employees that's relatively consistent. There's some up and down. And there's other functions, whether it's real estate or commercial contracts or things like that. There's a lot of work in legal departments, which lends itself to plan very well to planning. And you plan, your plan can take one stance for those types of work and those matters and those issues. And then for the other type of work, you've got to come up with different approaches. You mentioned, do you use a contingency planning scenario? Do you have, do you do a silo of, excuse me, sorry, I'm kind of talking with my hands today. Do you do a silo of, these are the range of options that could happen. So the way that you think about some of the unpredictability should enhance the strategic plan. It shouldn't be a limitation for not doing it. The other one that I sometimes hear is we're not big enough. And I can tell you, I've helped with strategic plans for 500-person legal departments. I've helped with 5-person legal departments. If you're only 2 people, maybe I'd say don't do. I would never say don't do the plan, but I'd say maybe you don't need a plan right now. Or a 3-person legal, maybe you don't need a plan right now. But try something. Try a 1-pager or something like that. But I'd say once you're over a certain scale, and I'd say 5 to 10, you're kind of would probably be a good idea. Over 10, you probably should have one. Over 20, I see no reason over why you shouldn't have one. And I do get that legal departments deal with crises, but not every year is a crisis. And you pick your time to do it. You pick your year to do it.
Jason, I'm glad you talked about the scalability thing, and even that last point regarding, the size of your department, be it small, be it large, can dictate perhaps whether you have a strategic plan. But I will tell you that I think virtually in every environment I've worked in, it's been a dynamic, fluid environment where nothing ever really stays the same. And of course, that's the same for the legal department. So whether you're scaling up or scaling down, there's constant churn in the water, if you will, and that you can always think strategically, or you should. You can certainly spend a good part of your days in the trenches, dealing with those crises. But once in a while, you have to pull up in altitude, survey the landscape, see which way you're heading or which way the business wants to head, and frankly, determine the course and speed of your legal department. Where does it want to head in this dynamic, sometimes very VUCA world that we find ourselves in oftentimes. Also, I do think that the strategic planning can be iterative. I think you nailed it by saying, initial strategic plan doesn't have to be a 20-page thing. It can be, frankly, it could be on 3x5 cards at the start, right?
Yeah.
It's about capturing those strategic oriented thoughts that you have, where it looks beyond the near-term horizon and just says, okay, this is where we are, this is where we want to head. How do I get there? And certainly, I spent my time. I still, I still carry my cards because I'm always jotting down things, and that's, I think, frankly, I think that was my really first strategic plan. It was on a bunch of cards, but then then we refined it. I communicated what was on those cards, and we talked about it with the team, and we built it. And so it can be an iterative process that doesn't necessarily have to take weeks and weeks to formulate. And oh, by the way, it's important to have a plan, not only an operational plan, but a strategic oriented game plan, even in its simplest form, as soon as you can have it. That, at least that's how I have felt. Any thoughts on that, Jason?
I love the bit about, it's easy to get hunkered down and, I don't know, be in the bunker and the day-to-day, but I love that sometimes you got to elevate. And it is a responsibility, I think, of leaders. The leaders of a legal department, and again, it's not just the general counsel, have a responsibility at times to shift their focus up and out and look in the environment and to ask all those tough questions. Are we where we want to be? Are we headed in the right direction? And are there threats incoming or also opportunities that we need to take advantage of? And that really is one of the Harvard Business School definitions of hallmarks of great leaders that have been studied. You have to be able to do it. And, I'm empathetic with my clients that the day-to-day challenges can't go away. The whack-a-mole can't go away, but the good ones somehow find time in their organization to get it done. And it doesn't mean that, the general counsel should not be writing the strategic plan, let me be clear. And sometimes even the deputy shouldn't be writing it. But there should be resources in the department that can help with it. It needs to obviously be reviewed, and there needs to be ownership by senior parties. The other thing too is legal departments. Most of the departments I work for spend 40 to 60% of their money outside the department on outside counsel, and they see value in having outside legal expertise or capacity. There's a new industry. There's a new world today of people skilled in this discipline of strategic planning. They have experience. Barker Gilmore is one of them. And they can help a busy legal department that wants to do one of these things, but maybe doesn't have the time to do the heavy lift all on their own. So that might be one of my last bits of misconceptions is we've got to do it all our own and we don't have the time. Well, you have to be involved and you have to steer it and you have to contribute. But even very sophisticated legal departments that I work for that have won all kinds of awards, they get outside help with this sort of stuff from time to time.
Thanks, Jason. So we've talked about, we've given an overview on strategic planning in the context of legal department. We talked or mentioned about benefits and communicated those. We've talked about misconceptions. And so maybe we'll move into, what are some of the best practices as hopefully we've got enough people thinking, gosh, okay, maybe I need to do this. Maybe we, wherever your organization is, maybe we need to do this. And, I'm looking, let me see. Okay, I think we're going to touch on this. I do have there is a question in the queue and we'll get to that. But let's start off with maybe Jason, what are some of the best practices for strategic planning? So now that we got folks interested or curious or hooked a little bit on the possibility, what are some of the best practices that you would recommend?
Right. So let's talk about a best practice of frequency. And I think people fall into this and they're like, well, if I start it, I'm going to have to do it every single year. It becomes this obligation. Nothing could be farther from the truth. I'd say if you're doing every year, you're in some sort of ultra gold plated standard and you deserve some kind of award. And some legal departments do. But if you're only doing it once every 5 years, that's probably not enough for the clean slate approach. You might update it. So I'd say pick a frequency every 2 to 3 years to really do one. And then AB, as you mentioned, it's a living document. You're kind of tweaking it as along the way. And it's easy to do the updates. It's the clean slate that's challenging. I would say establish a project leader, find somebody to do this. It's not the GC, it's not the deputy GC. They are the sponsors of this. But I'd say, have a clear leader and someone responsible. Don't put a big team on it. Committees, just like the Constitution, things written by committees, processes written by committees are problematic. Have a clear leader. The leader should be responsible for saying, this is the input that I want, this is the help that I want. But the leader or leaders, maybe 2 or 3 in a big department, are responsible for it. And they'll tell people, I want input on this, I want input on that. Another best practice, you should look at your corporate strategic plans. What are your clients' plans? What are they doing? What are they saying? Go back to AB Cruz. Hey, the advertising revenue is disappearing. Well, yeah, so the legal department strategic plan, we should be addressing fewer legal resources to advertising, review of our advertising models, but what new capabilities are we going to need? Because the business is trying to replace this through digital subscriptions or something like that.
Well, hey, Jason,
Yep.
while you got there, because I think you just touched on something that really goes to a question, the first question that was posted in the queue. And so let me read that. What are the elements of a legal department strategic plan? and this is the part I think you started going to, and how does it interact with the overall business plan of the corporation? I'll lead in by saying, and I certainly meant to mention it up front, and that is with the legal department strategic plan, at least how I always kind of went about it. I had the company's strategic plan in my back pocket. I pulled it out and I really looked at where there might be intersection between my team, my function, whether that be legal or compliance, and where there were obvious intersection points with the overall company plan. Obviously, I took that and then really fleshed it out. But as I mentioned earlier, I also took other areas that I mentioned DEI, and then probably more recently, the whole idea of ESG. I took those as kind of, these are leadership, or these are areas where legal was going to take a leadership position for the company. And so there was clear overlap and I would say alignment with the strategic plans, not only the company strategic plans, but business developments and finance. They're typically the ones I looked at, probably the most closest. So anyway, I hope that answers the question, at least from my perspective. Jason, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, so it's a great question. I think there's two parts. The first is, what are the elements of the plan? So let me throw out, and the answer is it depends. I've seen the 2-page plan versus the 20-page plan, it depends. But let me throw out 6 elements that I often see in these plans and I would be likely to recommend to a client. The first would be, what's the mission of the legal department? What are you trying to accomplish? What's your goal? Second, what are the resources you have available? People, capabilities, budgets to hire outside counsel and things like that. Then we get into item number 3, current state. Where are we currently? Where are our resources positioned? How do our capabilities match up against the current state? Item 4, what's the future state? Where do we want to go? Item 5, strategic priorities. That's the plan from the current to the future. And then 6, the detailed implementation plan. So we might say we've got 5 strategic priorities, or some people like to call them pillars. Anyways, there's all kinds of names for them. But you've got to go below. These are the 5 things we want to do. This goes back to AB's operationalization, if I said that properly. And you've got to have the implementation plan, which is, okay, this priority really involves 12 sub-steps. We think these steps are going to take 1 month, 2 months, 2 weeks, and then the fun part, which is assigning people to those things. And it can be a marvelous, the strategic plan could be a marvelous leadership opportunity for junior people in the legal department. They can take a hand in helping to draft it, and then they can take a hand in some of those assignments. And they should get credit for pushing those strategic objectives along forward in some kind of timely basis. Second question was, how does it interact with the business plan of the corporation? It's hard for me to improve on what you said, AB. I would just say, in the first case, you need to just make sure that it aligns with it and it interacts with it. And is updated as those, the business plans change. The business might say, yeah, we thought it was going to be a quiet year, and 6 months in, the markets look attractive, the strategic landscape has changed, and we're going to go on an acquisition tear. So the company's plan has changed, and then the business plan changed. So I would say alignment is the key thing. The other thing I think is very helpful, and maybe this goes back to benefits. I've yet to see a business leader be disappointed, whether it's the CEO or CFO or COO, be disappointed to hear legal has done a strategic plan and something they can look at, review, give input in. It becomes a conduit for communication, and leaders in the business can review it and say, and this is typically what I've heard is, legal, first of all, we're delighted you've done this because every other part of the business does it. Second, you've done a lot of good work here, but and where I sit in the business, I can see around this corner. And seeing around corners is a little bit difficult. And I noticed that isn't in here. Is this something that you are thinking about? Because it's going to hit us, and my hunch is it's going to hit you. So the tool, if nothing else, can be a catalyst for those communications.
Thank you. I'm gonna jump. This is a great question, and it's been asked of me several times before. As the GC, I support saying no to certain requests, especially when we have helped or guided the business to learn how to handle these tasks independently. How do we convince our legal teams who are reluctant to say no that it is okay to do so sometimes? Jason, any thoughts? I certainly have a thought or two, but go ahead.
All right, oy vey. So this is related to strategic planning, but there's also part of it that's not related to strategic planning. My view and adopts practices I've seen in other parts of my business from my prior part of my life when I wasn't working with legal departments, and I dragged them into legal. So high performing support functions, of which legal is a elevated one, admittedly, but it is still a support function. High performing support functions cannot survive, much less thrive, without a well-defined scope of service. Okay. I'm old enough to remember the days when I would show up at a big company, was working for the GC or something like that, as an outsider, and have a team of people, and we couldn't get on the internet, we couldn't this and this, and someone from IT would show up immediately. They'd be at our desk, they'd help out. Oh, wait a minute, you can't get this, and they'd kind of do everything. Anybody remember those good old days? I show up at the
Jason,
clients now that goes, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, Jason, I'm sorry. I think there was instability in your Wi-Fi or something. You just froze up for a minute. I think you're fine now. Go ahead.
Okay. So anyways, the kind of support you can get out of IT is much more narrow these days, in my experience, because they've defined it. They said, we're not able to support this, this, and this. We can help you with your password. We can help you with this hardware. We can help you with connectivity. But these apps that you're using, we're not supporting it. And that allows them to do their job with the resources that they have. So, I always like to ask my clients when they say we're having problems with our clients wanting more support than we are in a position to provide. Do you have a scope of service? Have you thought about it? Is it documented? Has it been socialized? And what's that change management that you have to do around your clients? And I go back to the IT department example. I think what annoys me about IT is they don't communicate it proactively. It's just sort of when you want something from them, you often are in a position where they tell you can't get it. I think IT and legal are much better off by proactively saying, this is what we do, this is our role in the company, and obversely, this is what we have decided not to do, and we're taking ownership of that no decision. And it's the scope of service.
Yeah. No, I like that idea
yeah.
of a scope of service. I do like, that question back to the GC. First, to the GC that asked that question, I applaud your efforts in terms of helping create more bandwidth, right, for your folks so that they can do maybe other priority works. And so I did the same thing where we would work with the business, we would train them to handle certain things. And so long as, the item or the matter was in within certain parameters, they were free to move forward. They had the blessing of legal to do so, worked well. Because it's not surprising that good lawyers also want to make sure that their clients are happy within a business, and so there is some hand holding and so forth. So if you're having trouble getting your legal team to kind of cut that umbilical cord, if you will, at least ever so slightly, sometimes one way of addressing that is, to Jason's point, is you should have a meeting of the minds, get together with folks, and that they're a clear understanding. But if you're still having issues, You know, when it comes to performance reviews, if they're focused on the wrong things, then if you're highlighting in a performance reviews of your attorneys, for instance, and saying, hey, you're spending, you know, way too much time on stuff that frankly, you know, you're not supposed to be doing, it certainly wakes them up when they're not getting credit in terms of their performance review. And, you know, as opposed to if they're working in a priority area where they would get more credit, so to speak. And so that tends to solve the issues of uncertainty, if you will, when it comes to that type of thing. I do want to get back to the, you were in the midst of best practices. I think I interrupted you, Jason. Were there any other best practices that you wanted to highlight for our audience today?
You know, I think I hit a lot of them. You know, maybe it's kind of interesting to use the word Bible. And I do think it is important to say this is something you revisit and you think about. If you're a religious person, you might reread the Bible, certain chapters of the Bible over and over again, even if you know what's in there. But I also think there is another side of the coin that I would stress is I don't view strategic plans as the 10 commandments. There's got to be give and take in them. There's, you know, any sane person would recognize that when circumstances change, things are going to change. That being said, it doesn't hurt. There's enormous value to having a framework and priorities set in advance, as opposed to just saying, well, everything's going to change anyways. We can't possibly do it. So I live by that phrase. We're taking our best shot, but it's not the 10 commandments. So it's because it's a holiday season. Some people have finished their religious holidays, another religious holiday, Christmas coming up. So maybe that's on my mind.
Good. I am mindful of the time, and so I want to make sure we get to a couple questions. So let me see. How do you best use your plan once it's created? Say that you've gone through the process, you've got it laid out. What are some thoughts there, Jason?
Oh, that's the fun part, right? You've gone through all the work. Well, the tool, the plan is a tool. You can use it in so many different ways. You can use it to communicate to external stakeholders what you're doing, and that you have a plan and here's your priorities. You can use it to inform and guide that corporate budgeting process. It can help you make the case for resources, and it can help you allocate the resources within it. But probably the most value add is within the legal department. It's an enormously valuable tool for aligning the organization. For, you know, new people love to have those things when they start in a job. Oh, these are the priorities. But I think that limits it. I think there's also people who've been in the department for a long time who might say, well, I define my role as this, and this is what I think the job is. But the strategic plan can help with that. And then I really think the power comes alive in those implementation plans where, you know, I've been charged with, let me make an example here. A lot of legal departments don't have a formal scope of service. That could be initiative number 5 of your 7 initiatives that the legal department's going to accomplish over 2 years. The legal department strategic plan can have that initiative. It can lay out, you know, the 1 or 2 or 3 people in the department who are in charge of developing that scope of service, because that's work. It's not going to materialize overnight, but say, here's what we think you should have at the end of 1 month, 3 months, 6 months. We're going to roll it out internally. At 7 months, we're going to roll it out to the clients at 9 months, and then we're going to do a survey at 12 months to see how it's going and make sure our clients have gotten the message and we're aligned with it. And that should be a plan for someone to implement, and it should be a plan for the leader to look at it and say, yeah, I know we're busy around here, but we had 12 months to do a scope of service. There were 8 steps to it. You know, why is it month 18 and we're only on step number 3?
Well, hopefully that's not the conversation they're having. I do agree with you. I think it is the exciting part. So you take your strategic plan, it's in some tangible form, right? Hopefully presentable, because I like sharing it with folks, and I tell our attorneys to go to their clients and introduce them to the strategic plan, and go a step further and say, walk them through at least some of the main points, especially those that might, whether it's a pillar or imperative or whatever you want to call it. You tell them how that particular goal or those sets of underlying goals impacts them, or how it will benefit them, and if they get feedback from them on what they think is missing, so that you can either say how it's being addressed, and so they're not left out, but really sharing it. And then I literally talked about keeping it in my back pocket. I literally carries the strategic plan around with me constantly, because I always we always bring it out. It's a live document. It's something we go to. I do like your comment. You said it's not the 10 Commandments. You're absolutely right. I mean, we don't want, we want our team, our individuals, our team members to be always thinking about all that's going on, and there may be reasons, and it's quite normal to tweak things here and there. It is not the 10 Commandments. It is a roadmap, maybe with different ways, different paths to get to the ultimate goal, and so I think that's important. We are coming up on the last couple minutes. Maybe a quick answer on this one, Jason. Okay, we've talked all about it. Let's go back to okay, they're ready to start. What's the best way to start? Get started.
I think you pick your leader, and it's a great opportunity. There's someone in the department that wants to do this, is my experience. There's someone that this is a leadership and development opportunity, and it's a chance for them to use their brain aside from their specific legal discipline to do. So assign it to someone. For a bigger department, maybe that leader gets 1 or 2 resources, helpers as well too. Make an announcement that you're doing it, but that announcement should also kind of set the time limit and say, we're undergoing a strategic planning process, and we think it's going to take 3 months. We're going to do 1 month of research. We're going to do 1 month of drafting. We're going to do 1 month of sort of finalization. And the reality is those often become 4 months. But still, it's a plan, and get your plans from your business, and use those as inputs, and talk to bright people that have done stuff like this, whether it's AB or other people at Barker Gilmore, and there are resources that can guide you. So that's how I'd say how you get going.
Okay, that's wonderful. I think we are coming up. Bob, I don't know. I see one more late entry on questions. Do you want to cover that, or do we want to cover that, or do you need to
go for it?
Okay. It says, do you have a strategic plan for the entire legal and compliance combined department, or should different subgroups, litigation, corporate governance, product / regulatory, have their own mandates?
All right, let me give the 1 minute answer. So if you're only doing the 2-page plan, you're not going to have stuff for everybody probably. But I've worked with very sophisticated departments where the litigation group had 20 people and a budget of $200 million. They had their own plan. So what you had was sort of nested plans. Each practice group and compliance had their own plans, and they rolled up into a macro level plan. So the short answer is it depends, but I would say, a gold standard would be practice groups of significance have their own plans. And I've even seen sophisticated groups say it's year A, and half the groups are going to refresh their plans, and then the next year the other group refreshes their plans. But it's a great question.
I concur.
But that cuts to the chase there, right, AB?
Yes, absolutely, it does. Thank you.
Well, AB and Jason, thanks so much for participating today and sharing some real practical information to our clients. For attendees who want to explore how we can help providing, in your assisting with your developing your strategic plan or executing a strategic plan, by all means, reach out to us. I'm happy to discuss how we can assist there, or recruiting talent for your team, or what have you. We are going to send out a 1-minute survey. So if we take a minute, would appreciate your feedback on today's session. And then we look forward to having you join us in the future. Thanks again for participating today, and AB and Jason, thanks again.
Yeah. So long.
Thanks for having me.
Bye now.